Hey, what is up, guys? It is Rapmark here, and doing another review for you. This time with Knives Out, the a film from Rian Johnson, who, well, I must say I'm not a fan of what he did to Star Wars. Um, I do think that he has done some good stuff, and this is definitely one that I say takes the cake. Going in, like, it's essentially it's kind of like Clue, this movie. There's an old man who is found dead, and then it's who is responsible for this, what happened, and essentially it sort of takes you back through the story, you know, with stuff that happened, via flashbacks, and you slowly start to get more of the story. And I'm obviously not going to get too in depth with it in this section, but what I will say is I thought it was very well acted. It had a good cast of characters. Um, the one thing I will say is there's a reveal made very early on that just sort of, I was just, why are you revealing this already? And it kind of took me out. But then by Act 3, I was brought back in. There was obviously, a twist, which, I mean, I thought it was actually well executed. So, I mean, it will lose some points for the early reveal it did make, which I'll go into in spoilers, but not here. But honestly, the story itself, I thought was, I mean, as far as a whodunit, it broke the mold of what you expect from a whodunit. But it does it in an interesting way. Like, I think the reveal I'm constantly talking about, it did take away from it. It did take away from it, but I do think it recovered somewhat by the end, just because the story itself was intriguing. It was entertaining with lots of good character interactions. So, going into it even further, so I mean, you had an amazing cast. Like, the cast was great. Obviously, Chris Evans. You had Daniel Craig as the sort of detective. Jamie Lee Curtis was in here, and I'm just like, wow, they really pulled a lot of good talent here. And in the first act, you do get a lot of them, and I really enjoyed that. You get a lot of backstory. What was the relationship between them and this old man who is their father, grandfather for some of them. And but then, after the reveal, it pretty much it pretty much just focuses on a couple of characters, and I think that's also another big weakness, is a lot of these characters kind of started disappearing by the second act, and by the third act they were pretty much irrelevant, which I wasn't as much a fan of. I mean, it wasn't completely just, it destroyed my love of this movie. I liked this movie. This movie I really enjoyed. I could even say I love this movie. I don't think it was, the best movie. I think they definitely could have done better with it, and and more with the characters. That's something I would have liked to have seen. But I mean, it was kind of a long. It was about 2 hours and 10 minutes. So I mean, I think they did the best with the time they did. But I would have liked to have seen more character interactions. The characters stay relevant for longer. And obviously with sort of the story, I wouldn't have had the big reveal that they had as early as they did. Um, but yeah, I mean, aside from that, I mean, this is a really enjoy. It was better than I thought it would be, to be honest. I mean, I went into this movie with probably not the highest expectations. I thought I would enjoy it just because, there's a lot of actors in here that I enjoy watching. Um, and then, of course, Rian Johnson. I do like some of his stuff. I was not a fan of his Star Wars, but other stuff, like he's done Looper, stuff like which I enjoyed. I know it didn't do very well, but hey, I enjoy weird stuff like that. So, all right. What else can be really said without going into spoilers? Not too much, actually. So I think I'm going to go ahead and deliver the final verdict for this one, at least in the non-spoiler section. And I'm going to go ahead and give this an 8. I really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. I I like the fact that they did something new. I just don't think it was executed well in the early reveal of, a big reveal, essentially. But the twist was good. Like there were obviously some contrivances and a suspension of disbelief with some of the reasoning and rationale. But I mean, if you can look past that, it actually was a pretty good story. It was fairly grounded. So yeah, it gets an 8 out of 10. Drop it a couple points again just for the big reveal, and because I wish they would have done more with the characters. So that's pretty much that for this. So we will be back. Well, it's just me for this week, unfortunately. Casual Houseplant was out of town again. So we'll see about next week. But anyway, I will see you on the spoiler section here in just a bit. So I'll see you then. Okay, so let's go with the spoiler section, like who did it. And at the end of the day, it was a suicide. He killed himself. So I mean, essentially what happens is there's this old man, he has this writing sort of empire thing set up, and he's celebrating his 85th birthday, and his nurse accidentally gives him the wrong dosage of the wrong medicine, and then doesn't have the antidote, so she has to. So he creates this plot to where. Okay. So I have to go back. So, all right, so it's his 85th birthday. All his kids are there. And I guess the next day, and he already tells this with, what's his name? Hugh. What was his character name, though? One sec. Ransom. All right, Ransom. Chris Evans. So he pretty much explains to him, he tells him the whole story. He's going to cut everyone out of his will. Everything's going to go to Marta, who is his nurse, who has been with him for so long. And yeah, that he gets nothing. Everyone else gets nothing. Everything goes to Marta and her family. And, he obviously storms out. None of the kids know this at the time. They're waiting for the reading of the will. Well, not at the time, but they have no idea they're about to be cut out, essentially, except for Chris Evans' character, Ransom. So he goes off and stews, but yeah, so she accidentally injects him with morphine instead of his painkillers, and and it's sort of this weird thing of like 10 minutes, like he has 10 minutes to live, something like that. But before, so like her mother is an illegal, so he creates this story, has her do all this sorts of stuff, sneak down so one of his sons catches him, climb up through the trellis, uh, wander past security cams and stuff like that. It's a little weird, but it is entertaining. Like it was entertaining to watch. It was fun. So the funnest thing I had with this girl is that apparently she can't lie because of some game that they played a year ago, a couple years, something like that, in which I don't know if that was where it was revealed to a couple to the family or whatnot, but yeah, when she lies, she vomits, and so yeah, that is played with a lot. Sometimes it's funny. I don't think it ever hit cringy for me. Sometimes it was just like, okay, and just light chuckle. But there were some times where it was genuinely like funny, humorous, like just like perfect timing. So he has to tell. So she goes through all this, she tries to go back. It's revealed in a flashback. She tries to go back, and yeah, it ends up he slits his throat. And yeah, so that's whodunit. He killed himself. It was a suicide, plain and simple. And so after that, you obviously the funeral, all that stuff. The reading of the will obviously comes out. Everyone's there, and they find out that everything's going to Marta, and he's just in like Ransom's just in high spirits. He's a total dick. My first impression was I didn't like him, but he was funny. He played his part really well. Okay, so after the reading, we go into. I'm trying to remember if I forgot anything. Oh, so questioning before the will reading. There's questioning by the cops, and there's this detective here, a private detective. He goes by the name of Blanc, and it's Daniel Craig, and it's. I didn't mind the accent, but yes, it is a very foghorn leghorn accent, and it makes fun of that in the movie. Like it doesn't pull its punches there. It's a really weird accent for him, and I when you hear it, you're just like, you just can't unsee it. It's like seeing those words and that accent come out of his mouth it's a little weird. All right, so he pretty much questions the family as well, after the police do their investigation, and he takes Marta to be close, because as he says, she has a good heart. And so we go through all these, like trying to figure out what happened, and it's kind of funny because she's trying to cover up all these tracks so that it doesn't fall on her, like walking over her own footprints. Also using magnet on the video cassette that had her leaving the party and then bouncing out of there early. So there's a whole lot of that, but pretty much after the will reading, like this is where the side characters kind of start to fade into irrelevance, which is kind of sad. You have a whole blow up. She gets into Ransom's car, and he pretty much has her eat something, And you find out later he knows full well that she vomits when she lies. So he pretty much asks her, what the hell? What actually happened? And after all is said and done, I mean, I still believe he had his issues. It's just like maybe he's turning a corner because he's like saying, don't give up the money. I'm going to help you. It was a little far, but then it's just like, but then once this is said and done, just give me my 50%, my share of the inheritance. And so so it was well done. I for one thought that he was not. At that point, I had not bought into the fact that he was the one who ultimately set this whole thing up. So after that, you go into this weird car chase in her little shitty vehicle. And they even say it at the end of it. It's like, that was the stupidest car chase ever. Because it was just so bad. But it was super funny. And so Ransom gets taken in. She goes, but she also has this email. So sort of like what happened. And when she goes to see what's going on with the email, it turns out it is the sort of caretaker, like the housekeeper. I'm trying to see if I can find her name. Fran. And she's you get in there and like you think she's dead at first because there's like spiders and all this weird stuff, but she's still alive, but she's obviously not doing well. And you're just like, what the heck was this all about? Obviously something or someone is behind it. And when they go to get the records building is all burned down. It is all burned down. And that's where that whole chase begins. And then after that, it becomes a case of we go back to the house. All the family's there. She's going to confess, saying that she accidentally killed him. That's what actually happened. But then it clicks for the detective, and he's just like, nope, she's not going to give you any of the money. This was a suicide. And it was a suicide. So essentially, you go back, and, obviously the whole reveal, it's almost like Monk style, like what actually happened. So after the argument Ransom had with his grandfather, he storms out, and in his moment of clarity, he comes up with this plan to frame Marta for his grandfather's death. So he goes in, he pretty much does what the old man, God, what is his name? It is Harlan Thrombey. Yep. So he goes in and switches the medication bottles so that she mistakes which one's which. And takes away the antidote just in case, obviously, because it doesn't want him to be saved, just in case. And then he sneaks out, obviously, but he can't get back in because the dogs are now out. So he has to wait for a time for the family to all be down, which is why he didn't make it to the funeral. He snuck in, did what he had to do, and then snuck back out. So, he hears the newspapers. It's just like, oh, this is suicide. Well, he's in high spirits, so I'm guessing it's before then. So while they're questioning I may need to rewatch it because I think I may be mixing up a couple of story beats here, but we're gonna keep going. Um, yeah, that's why he's in such high spirits for the will reading because it's just like, oh sweet, it's a murder, and that's what he's thinking, and she's gonna be pinned on it, and he knew that she was getting everything, so boop. But then later, it comes out on the paper that it's like suicide, and then she tells him like at the diner when he asks what the hell happened, he realizes she didn't commit a crime, so he now has a problem. So he decides he's now going to help her out, but he has other ways of framing her because apparently when he was in during the funeral, the housekeeper, Fran, did see him and was just like, what do you do? Like, she didn't say anything, but knew it was a problem. And when he found out about that, the note itself, the whole, like, letter that she got was actually sent to Ransom first because she was blackmailing him. I don't know what her plan was because it's just like, I'm going to lure you into a building in the middle of nowhere by myself with no weapons. And then when he comes at her, it's just like, no. It's so I don't know what the expectation was. That was a little bit of a weak point, but yeah, so he grabs her, knocks her out, and injects her with morphine, and then burns the record, but she had made another copy, which she held in her weed stash. So with that, Ransom is just like, this is all very clever. But it's just a fairy tale. You have no proof. And then Marta gets a call. Well, let me make sure I'm getting her name right. Because, yeah, it's Marta. And it's the hospital. And she's just like, oh, she's fine. She's awake. And that's the housekeeper. Once again, Fran. She's going to be fine. All that. And that's when Ransom's just like, what have you got on me? The murder of the housekeeper. Except I didn't. So what? Attempted murder? So he confesses pretty much the whole thing. And as he's about to just start laughing, she just is like, and vomits all over her face. And he's just like, what the fuck? It was, yeah. And yeah, so apparently Fran did not make it. She died. She got the overdose and it killed her. And he confessed to the murder. He confessed he did it. So that is pretty much the extent of it. I mean, she pretty much ended up getting everything, and it wasn't because... And she ended up pinning everything on him, not because she played the game by his rules, but because she had such an amazingly good heart. And so... I mean, toward the end, it became less of a whodunit and more of a, like, who's going to get the money. And, yeah, she got everything. Everyone got cut loose. They're now free to live their own lives and make their path through it as much as possible. So, honestly... I really enjoyed this movie, but I did think there were some glaring issues which did cost it a couple points. Obviously the early reveal, it was revealed literally at the beginning of the second act as to what happened. She made a mistake with the medications, and that did take a little bit out of it, because at that point it's just like, so it was a suicide, but... and you kind of had to wait a while. But again, they did ramp things up. They did play around with it a little bit, whether or not the medicine was mixed or not mixed. And yeah, another spoiler in the spoilers. she could tell the difference regardless of looking at the bottles. So he had actually taken his proper dose of medicine and not OD'd, so he committed suicide for no good reason other than he believed he had OD'd on morphine. And yeah, I mean, but yeah, I love the characters. Even Daniel Craig's character, even though he got a little more derpy with time, you're just like, is this guy really that good of a PI? But yeah, you find out. I mean, at the very beginning, he's hired, but through an anonymous source. Who did it? Ransom. Why? Because I guess he needed to. He wanted it to be pinned on her. Why he needed a PI to do this, and a reportedly good one. That's a little weird. I mean, it would have fallen on her anyway if the toxicology report had come out that he had overdosed. But if he hadn't, yeah. So I don't know. It was a little weird. There were some really contrived moments in terms of some of the getting the twist to actually work. But I do think they did a good job. I actually really enjoyed this movie. I know I sound like I'm hating on it, but I'm trying to review both the good and the bad. And it did have its faults, but I really, really enjoyed this. This is why I'm giving it an 8. It loses a couple points again. Early reveal, which, just like, okay, that kind of took me out of it, but you brought me back, so that's fine. And then from Act 2 to Act 3, this other side character just got increasingly irrelevant, and it was a little disappointing to me. So that's why it doesn't get a 10 for me. But honestly, this is a great movie, and I would totally recommend. It is worth a watch. So anyway, that is the end for that. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you on the next time. See ya.